It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here. That's what you've earned here tonight.
Forget about the crowds, the size of the school, their fancy uniforms, and remember what got you here. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the f***ing difference between winning and losing.
It's down to the wire with Errol Marks and Speedy Petey.
Oh, Petey!
On the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Down to the Wire, and I'm your host, Errol Marks, my co-host, Mr. Speedy Petey. As you know, you can reach us by going to our website at www.worldwidesportsradio.com. You can follow us on all our social media. And by the way, we have an app. Yes, our app is up on Android. It will be up on the iOS system very, very soon. How do you find us? You go to Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Yes, Worldwide Sports Radio Network. And you can find us, WWSRN. As you guys know, it's definitely something that people can actually reach, read our blogs, read every single thing that we are doing for events, sponsorships, and every single thing, including our shows. You can watch us, listen to us on our app. So it's going to be a tool for not only the millennials, but some of the older, more radio-friendly people out there, the 60, 50, and 40-year-old people that actually don't know how to use social media like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So this will give you the opportunity to link up with us on the social media market. Anyways, before we get into our show, I do want to get into this. And I know a lot of people want to hear what I have to say with which is what is going on right now with our network and what we're moving forward with. Not even our network, but what has happened in the last couple of days and weeks with RTS Sports Radio. And I want to thank all the fans that have voted for us. And I'm talking about all of you guys, every single person, family members, friends, all of you, everybody that has voted for Below the Mic. I want to thank you, every single one of you. I want to thank every single one of you for voting for us. I learned in the last couple of days that, and I don't know the whole story behind it, and I know a lot of people wanted to hear my thoughts to it, so I'm going to give you my thoughts to it. I'm upset because I believe that the voting was not done the right way. And I believe that there was some cheating going on with the voting. Now, I can't prove it, and I'm not going to point my fingers to anybody because I don't know the full truth. But I will say this. I will not teach cheating to anybody, including the people on my network, my friends, my family, and the fans that listen and search us and follow us every single day on our network. Now, I don't blame anybody for it, and if it is true, and if it is going to be proven, which it probably won't be, I'm not hurt that we lost in the voting. As a matter of fact, I'm going to congratulate Twist for beating us. I'm not here to take shots at anybody because I'm a professional and I don't do that. That's not my personality, so I won't do it. But I will say one thing, and I'm going to say this from the heart. When you cheat, you don't win. You're actually afraid of losing. So to me, when I look at this particular story, and I'm not pointing fingers, I believe that the voting was unfair. I believe that the voting wasn't done the right, proper way. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not pointing any fingers. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you are pointing fingers. No, I'm not, because I can't prove it. But again, I'll congratulate Twist because I'm the man, and I'm a man. I am the man, actually. I am the man. But I want to congratulate Twist for beating us. But again, to me, it was an unfair voting and unfair poll in my eyes. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So I want to thank all my friends, family, fans, every single person that voted for us and put the time in and day out to vote for Below the Mic and the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Thank you for doing that. I really appreciate every single one of you guys. I love you all. Fans, thank you for putting the time. Even if it's 5 seconds, you put the time in. I respect that because you want people, you want everybody, not only just your friends and your family, to your fans to vote for you because you appreciate the time and energy that you guys put into it. And I think me and Speedy put a lot of time into our products. So I'd like to thank everybody for voting for us.
Same thing for me. Everyone that I contacted who voted diligently, all my family, all my friends, thank you for voting for Below the Mic. We really appreciate it. And hopefully next month we're nominated. We can win this time.
I don't want to be nominated. How's that? I don't want to be nominated.
So the cheating scandal got you?
I don't want to be nominated. I don't want to be a part of any poll or voting anymore. The only time I want to be voting and I want to win is in SB. That's about it. I don't want anything to do with these polls. That has nothing to do, and I'm not taking a shot at any polls, RTF, Twist, or any of that. I don't want to be a part of any polls. That's just my honest opinion. I just don't want to be a part of it. So I appreciate RTF for nominating us. I appreciate all the nominees. What is it? Off the what's
on
that?
And off the field.
On and off the field and Twist. Great nominees, and I'm not going to take any shots at them. They work really, really hard on their product and their show, so I appreciate what they do for the sports radio and sports radio, their RTF and all the sports radio networks around the country that are trying to push out their product. So I'm not going to take a shot at them. So I will say that. That's all I'm going to say about that. Anyways, I see Snug writing stuff. Can I be Earl's +1 if he wins in SB? Thank you, Snug. Thank you. Anyways, I do want to get into the NFL draft, and I know a lot of people are going to ask us, and everybody wants to hear our logic to what we thought, what we're going to grade some of these teams that drafted in the NFL draft this past weekend. So, Speedy, we're going to go through the AFC East first, okay? You're going to go through your AFC East. You're going to go through some of their draft picks, each team's draft picks, and grade them. Are you ready?
Here we go.
Here we go.
All right, so I'll start with the New England Patriots. I'll start with the Patriots. They had a very weird draft for the most part. I gave it a C-. I think in terms of them getting late picks, I didn't think they did as well as they normally did. They reached a lot early on in the second round to me. Kyle Duggar was a very good combine story, D2 safety. And again, he's somebody that Belichick could definitely work with. But again, a little bit of a reach. I like Anthony Jennings, but again, not much else really to like with the Patriots. They didn't draft a quarterback, which a lot of people were surprised at. I think they didn't draft a pass rusher besides Jennings, which I was surprised at too. I thought they were going to go after Epinesa, or they were going to go after somebody maybe earlier in the first round, maybe trade up for Chason before the Jaguars got to them. So Patriots as a whole, a C- for me. Next, I'll go to Miami, the next lowest grade on my list. I don't think they did terrible, but I think they could have done better considering the amount of picks that they had. I gave them a C+. Obviously, we knew they were going to draft a quarterback, which ended up being Tua. And I like the pick in the second round, too, of Raekwon Davis, the defensive tackle out of Alabama. Curtis Weaver, a nice fifth-round pick as well. Beyond that, I think they reached a lot. Austin Jackson, I think, yeah, you need an offensive lineman, but it was a little too early for my liking. The corner they drafted at the end of the first round, Noah Igbinoghene, he might be a scheme fit, but I think it's a little early for him as well. So I just think they reached too much for a team that has so many picks and also has so many needs. You can't try to do that until you have a lot of other things solved. So Dolphins get a C+ for me. in terms of the Buffalo Bills, they didn't have many picks, but they made a lot of them work. I gave them a B+. I think they did a nice job. It was very good value. They got Epinesa at the end of the second round, which I think was a great pick for them, substituting pass rush depth after losing Shaq Lawson last year. And he's going to be a nice player on that team. He doesn't really need to be a number one guy right away, even if they're worried about him being still kind of raw. He doesn't need to be that on that defense, because that defense is loaded. Zach Moss, very skilled running back when healthy. They got him in the third round, and he'll be a nice player to complement Devin Singletary. And then you got Jake Fromm as a solid backup quarterback, who I think is a nice, safe option to back up Josh Allen if Josh Allen gets hurt. And certainly is a lot better than what they had with Nathan Peterman. And Isaiah Hodgins, a speed guy, Oregon State wide receiver in the 6th round, that definitely could be a good option too. So a B+ for me for the Buffalo Bills. And then the New York Jets, one of the big winners for me in the NFL draft. They get an A. I think they really did a really good job with a lot of great value picks. Mekhi Becton in the 1st round. They needed offensive line. They go offensive line. A little raw in pass blocking, but he has great speed for his size. Played in an RPO offense with Lamar Jackson at Louisville for a year. And once he gets that pass blocking up, he's going to really be able to develop into a nice tackle. Denzel Mims was one of the best value picks, maybe the best value pick of the 2nd round. Zuniga, the pass rusher in the 3rd round. LaMichael Piron I like in the 4th round as a good power back to give Le'Veon Bell a breather. And a lot of good value picks. And I love Bryce Hall in the 5th round too. Bryce Hall was one of the better corners in the nation before he got hurt. He tore his Achilles during the college season this year and probably would have been a 2nd round pick, maybe late 1st round pick if he played well. And the Jets might get a steal. He's not going to be able to play well this year, just coming off the injury, just an injury recovery. But in the future, he could emerge into a number 1 corner. He is that talented. The Jets had one of the best drafts in my board and get an A.
Really? You gave him an A?
I did.
Interesting. All right, so as you guys know, I'm going to go through, just like the AFC, just like Speedy Petey, I'm going to go with the top team of the AFC East this year, all the way to the lowest team, the Miami Dolphins. So here we go. The New England Patriots. I was very surprised they didn't draft a quarterback. Jordan Love was right there for them for the pickings. They decided to not draft him. You saw Green Bay move up and grab him. I was very surprised they didn't go after quarterback, but we've seen this over and over again with the Patriots. I believe they're going to be looking for a quarterback in next year's draft. There's Fields, there's Lawrence. I could see them trying to make a move for one of those quarterbacks in next year's draft. So I like what they did. They added some defensive help, but you know Bill Belichick's all about defense. He likes to bring in defensive players. He brought out a couple of DBs in the later rounds. He brought in a safety in the 1st round. I like what they did. Kyle Duggar is a good young player. A lot of teams were very interested in him. A lot of people thought he was going to be possibly a top 10 pick. He fell down to the Patriots in the 20. I think he was 23rd.
No, he was a 2nd round pick.
I'm sorry.
They traded back from the 23rd pick.
That's right. So go back to the thing. I'm looking at your pick. I'm not looking at the picks on my computer. So I like what they did with Kyle Duggar. I also like that they also had another 2nd round draft pick, Josh Uche, whatever his name is, another good player, linebacker from Michigan, very good player. Can get to the quarterback, can blitz. This is what the Patriots like to do. They like to try to find linebackers from big programs. You've seen Dante Hightower. They've done this year in and year out. This kid who also played for Michigan, another player that they drafted last year from Michigan.
Chase Vinovich. Yeah.
Chase Vinovich, who they know each other very, very well. Linebackers, both of them are linebackers. They're going to be connected with each other now with the New England Patriots. So I like what the New England Patriots did in their draft. If you were to ask me what I rate them, I rate them a B- for the draft. I thought they were going to go after a quarterback. I thought they were going to go after some offensive linemen, especially a center. I think they need a center on that team. So I was very surprised that they didn't go after a center. Buffalo Bills. Now, I think Buffalo Bills had a very good draft. I really do. Now, you talk about Buffalo. They added Stephon Diggs. They added Josh Norman in the offseason. That was a big pickup for them. Added another corner, a secondary corner that they needed. But in the 2nd round, Buffalo went after. And this is what Buffalo did in this draft. They added offensive weapons for Josh Allen. They added Jake Fromm. I was very surprised about that. But I was very surprised that the Jets added a Morgan in the draft. But they need a backup quarterback, and Jake Fromm is a good, reliable backup quarterback. We'll see as he progresses. A lot of people thought that Jake Fromm 2 years ago was going to be a 1st round draft pick, and then this year he didn't have such a great season, and he fell he fell off, and he was a fifth round draft pick. So I thought Jake Fromm was a good value pick in the fifth round. They added a lot of good offensive weapons for Josh Allen. I think that's what you need. You have to. What you see in this division, it's going to transition to an offensive division. You saw what the Jets did. You know what the Patriots are, even without Tom Brady. You know they're going to add offensive weapons as they progressively move forward, in the next couple of years. So I graded the Buffalo Bills a B+. The New York Jets. Now everybody says you're a New York Jet fan, so I'm not going to be biased. I'm going to be honest. I like Becton as the 11th pick. I really do. He's the biggest offensive lineman we've seen in the last 10 years. 6'7", 364 pounds, who can run a 40 in 5.1 seconds. So the speed of this kid, the footwork that this kid has, and even though he doesn't have the longest arms out of all these offensive tackles in this year's draft, he's amongst the top 5 players in this draft with the longest arms. So the guy has tremendous body structure as an offensive lineman, and he can do a lot of things good. He's one of the best run stoppers run blockers in the FBS. So I like what he did. I like what they did over there. Now, round 2, I like what Joe Douglas did. They had the 49th pick. They drafted down. They gave it to Seattle, and they got an extra third-round draft pick, which they traded with the New England Patriots and added 2 fourth-round draft picks and a 6th round next year. So I love what Joe Douglas did. And they still got their player. They still got Denzel Mims, who from Baylor, who's a very good offensive wide receiver who can jump. He could do a lot of acrobatic things, and he's very fast. He ran a 4.3 at the combine. So I really, really like that pick. But I think the pick of the day in round number 3 was Ashton Davis, who was, to me, the second best safety on the board behind, what's his name again, from the Giants?
Xavier
McKinney. So I like Ashton Davis very, very much, very underrated. And some people think that they're going to use him as a cornerback on this defense. They're going to move him in the nickel packages, and they can maneuver him on the safety positions and the cornerback positions as they move forward. I really like this kid. I'm looking at some of the players. James Morgan was, to me, they really liked him. Now, they need a backup quarterback. You saw last year with no backup quarterback how much trouble the New York Jets had last year when they didn't have a backup quarterback for Sam Darnold with the mono situation. So I like James Morgan. He's a guy that he's a project, and I think the Jets really, really liked him, especially at the combine. They gave him high grades. So a lot of people were very surprised, and it was a make-or-break draft because of James Morgan. I beg to differ. I think he was a good pickup. LaMichael Perrine, I don't know much about him. I know he's a power back. Some people compare him to Sean Green that used to play for the Jets. A guy that can block. He's a good run blocker. So he's a guy that is another work in progress for the New York Jets. I'm going to question why they picked him in such an early round. Some people thought he was a 5th-round draft pick, but the Jets really liked him. Also, another 4th-round draft pick that I absolutely liked, this was a steal in my eyes for the Jets draft, was Cameron Clark, who was a Charlotte. He played for Charlotte this year. He was one of the best offensive tackles in the nation in his division. And now they're going to probably move him to guard because they're going to maneuver him in all different ways for the Jets, especially with their offensive line clustered right now with Font and Van Rothen and all the different players that they brought in the offseason. I really, really like this move, and they can maneuver him at the offensive tackle position and the guard position because he has said that he can play multiple positions, including center. Also, I love their round number 5 pick with Bryce Hall, who could have been a top pick in the 1st round or possibly a top pick in the 2nd round. He fell all the way to round number 5 because of injuries. This is a guy that tore his Achilles in the middle of the season. He only played 6 games last year. Kid's explosive and one of the most underrated corners in this year's draft. The Jets stole him in the 5th round. He could be their starting number 1 next year. He will not play this year with his... they're saying he might play at the end of the season, but he probably will miss the whole season.
Right, still recovering.
With his
Achilles. He's probably
Achilles.
going to miss half the year at the very most. And you don't expect him to see him probably until the end of the season.
And then there's Braden Mann, who I don't know much about, but another pick that a lot of people liked in the round number 6. A guy that a lot of people thought was a third, possibly a fourth-round draft pick. He fell all the way to the 6th round, so he's another steal for the New York Jets. So I graded the Jets an A-, B+, A-. That's where I graded the Jets. I gave the Jets the highest grade in their division, not because I'm a Jet fan. I think the Jets did enough in the draft, especially adding offensive line help. They gave themselves a future left tackle. I do believe Becton will start at the right tackle position early in the season and eventually be pushed over there to the left tackle position. They're not going to start him at the left tackle position early because they want to give him confidence. They want him to work on his footwork and all that other stuff that you need to work on before they move him to the blind side of Sam Darnold. So I gave the Jets a B+, A-. As far as the Miami Dolphins, I was questioning the Tua move by them. I know Tua was a highly profiled player coming into the draft. This is a guy that tore his hip. He ripped his hip. He had hip surgery at the age of 19 or 20 years old. He's a quarterback. He uses his hip to throw the ball. So if he gets hit from a 360-pound lineman, what's going to happen to that hip? That's going to be the question. He says he's 100%. The Dolphins think he's 100%. But is he 100%? I don't know. So I'm questioning their first-round draft pick. Then they have a couple of first-round draft picks, but their first pick. Their second pick, Austin Jackson. I don't know much about Austin Jackson. What did you think about Austin Jackson?
A second-round grade. He's a decent speed blocker for the most part. Better run blocker than he is pass, but I thought they reached on him. I thought he was more of a second-round prospect.
But Noah, I like the Noah move. He's a cornerback. I think he was a late first-round draft pick, early second-round draft pick. But I have seen a couple of clips of this kid. I wanted the Jets to draft him in the second round if they had an opportunity to draft him. Obviously, they didn't. So I like the kid from Auburn. He was the best corner for the Auburn Tigers. Robert Hunt and all the players. I'm looking at all the players. Raekwon Davis. I don't know anything about Robert Hunt, but Raekwon Davis is another player that a lot of people thought could have been a first-round grade player, defensive tackle, can get to the quarterback. He's a good run stopper, Alabama native, so I like him. I was very surprised they got him in the second round at pick number 56. So he was a steal for the Miami Dolphins. All in all, I graded the Miami Dolphins, to me, a B. I gave him a B because I'm not sure what Tua is. If Tua comes out and he's a strong player, I could grade him higher. But I don't know what Tua is, and if I don't know what Tua is, I'm not going to grade him that high. So I gave him a B.
All right, where are we going now?
AFC North.
AFC North. So I'll start with my lowest in the AFC North, which was the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the Steelers didn't have many picks. They turned them into great players, including Minkah Fitzpatrick with their first-round pick this year. So they didn't have many picks to work with. They had some good picks. I like Chase Claypool. He's definitely an interesting option to look at. Antoine Brooks in the 6th round, I think, was a decent pick for them. Beyond that, I don't know really if they did as well as they could have. I expected them to address more secondary than they did, at least get some depth in that secondary to help out with Joe Hayden and with Minkah, because obviously the rest of their guys have had trouble developing as a whole. Steven Nelson was up and down last year. They had other safeties that were struggling, so we'll see if Brooks can be the guy. I just don't know if they can trust him to do as one. Anthony McFarland's a solid backup running back. I don't know if I would have taken him that early, but solid backup running back. So kind of an average draft. They didn't have much to work with, so I gave him a C. The Browns I'm going to do next. I gave them a C+. I think they had a lot of kind of boomer bust picks. Really,
terrible
for the
draft
most
for the Browns.
I've reiterated many times I'm not a big Jedrick Wills fan. They took him in the first round. I think there were better tackles out there. I know people like him with his speed and his mobility, but his raw strength is not great, and I think for that kind of system, I don't love it. I like the pick of Grant Delpit in the second round. He was my favorite safety coming into this draft. Good coverage guy. He just had trouble with his raw tackling ability, but he also could be a box safety and blitz. He has good speed and coverage ability. I like Jacob Phillips. I think they reached on him a little bit, though, because he didn't play much at LSU. I thought they could have gotten him a lot later, and I think they took him over Zach Baum, which is very interesting. And Donovan Peoples-Jones was a decent pick, but again, they have a lot of boomer bust picks, a lot of reaches for the Browns. Still not bad value, and they fill positional needs, but I think in terms of the positional needs that were available, but I still think they reached a lot. in terms of this draft. So I gave the Browns a C+. And then 2 A's for the Bengals and for the Ravens. I think they both did an excellent job in this draft. I'll start with the Bengals. Obviously, they got Joe Burrow. That's the big name. But they also filled out with other good players, too. I think they got 2 nice linebackers with Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither. Good value for both of them. T. Higgins in the second round. He's kind of recovering from injury, so he might take a little while to get it going, but still a nice player, good physical receiver when he's healthy. The only thing that kept the Bengals from getting an A+ is they didn't address enough offensive line. That was the only thing that stopped them from getting an A+. Otherwise, it was a very good draft in terms of value for the Bengals. And for the Ravens, they did a great job, too, with getting their value and filling a lot of needs for them. They got 2 very nice receivers in this draft, and Devin Duvernay at the end of the third round, one of their compensation picks. And they also got a guy I didn't even know that declared, and James Proche, who's a very nice receiver as well, kind of a bigger-bodied guy, but also versatile to be a slot guy, too, in the 6th round. I thought he was going to stay another year at SMU, but ended up making it work. And then Patrick Queen, what a nice value for them late in the first round. They had trouble guarding tight ends last year. Queen is a good man coverage guy and is also a very good outside run stopper as well, and they needed that middle linebacker to help out their defense. And then the rest of their draft, just a lot of good value picks. J.K. Dobbins, another running back to add into that mix. Justin Matabuke, a decent defensive lineman in the 3rd round. And Malik Harrison is a nice pick as well. And then bolster the rest of the offensive line depth. So the Ravens, they get an A as well. I think they really did a phenomenal job with this draft, considering how late they were drafting. All
right, I'm going to go to the Baltimore Ravens first. I love Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen is a guy that could stop tight ends, could play the field. He could also stop wide receivers, certain wide receivers. He's got the speed to play the middle and defend the middle, so I really like Patrick Queen. J.K. Dobbins is another good player, Ohio State Buckeye, another guy that can play very, very well at running back, one of the best running backs in this year's draft. Justin, how do you pronounce his name? Matabuke, defensive tackle for Texas A&M. Another good player, another very high-profile defensive tackle in this year's draft. Very surprised he fell to the 3rd round. I thought he was a 2nd-round draft pick, so I like that that pick. So all in all, their picks, and I'm not going to go through all their picks. I graded the Ravens one of the highest on my board. I gave them an A. So I like the Ravens. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Peter. Oh, you got the Buffalo Bills there. Got it? All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they didn't have a lot to draft with. They gave up their 1st-round draft pick for Mika Fitzpatrick last year, the Miami Dolphins. Mika Fitzpatrick paid huge dividends in the second half of the season for them, really solidified their secondary. Chase Claypool, who a lot of people thought was a very underrated wide receiver in this year's draft. I was surprised they didn't go after Mims. He fit better with the Ravens because I think the Ravens needed that guy that can go deep and make the plays deep. They don't have that guy anymore. I think they have a lot of guys that can play the slot and run a lot of good routes, but they don't have that guy that can go deep, the speed guy, the long, lengthy guy. So I was very surprised they went after Chase Claypool, but Chase Claypool, very good wide receiver. Like I said, it had a lot of depth. This wide receiving class had one of the most depthful wide. Matter of fact, I think there were 14 wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds, which is the most ever in NFL history. Mm-hmm. So it had a lot of depth for wide receivers, and there are going to be a lot of wide receivers in this year's draft. Alex Highsmith, who is another Charlotte native, another guy, edge rusher. Very surprised that they got him in the 3rd round. Another guy that a lot of people thought was a 2nd-round draft pick. A good edge rusher. Not a great edge rusher. He could do a lot of things besides edge rushing. He could also, he's not bad on at the run, too, stopping the run. So I like, all in all, for the amount of picks that they had, and they had 6 picks, I would give Pittsburgh, I don't know what I would give. I could give Pittsburgh C+. A C+, because they didn't have that many picks. And they had a lot of positions to fill. The Cleveland Browns. Let's go to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Jedrick Wills. Jedrick Wills. I like him. As an offensive lineman, I thought he was the best overall offensive lineman in this year's draft. Now, Speedy didn't like him. I like him. He's got sensational footwork. He's got the longest arms out of every single offensive lineman in this year's draft. And his footwork's very, very good as well. Is he the fastest offensive lineman? Do you really need to be fast as an offensive lineman? Only if you're a good running team. Now, I do believe when I look at the Cleveland Browns, they have a good running team, and they have Chubbs. They still have Kareem Hunt, who they franchised, and they put a tender on him. And if anybody wants it, I think they put a first-round tender.
I think it was a second-round tender.
No, it was a first-round tender.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure it was a first-round tender. So he's still on the team. So if a team's interested in him, I don't know if they're going to be able to get him, because I don't know if anybody's going to give up a first-round, even a second-round draft pick for Kareem Hunt right now with all the background and all the different stuff that he's had on and off the field.
Maybe later in the season if a team becomes desperate for a running back at the trade deadline.
Third round, Jordan Elliott. I think he was a good value pick. Defensive tackle from Missouri. A guy that can is a good run stopper, can get at the quarterback too. I like him too. So all in all, I gave the Cleveland Browns a C-. I didn't like their draft. Besides their first and their third round draft pick, it wasn't the best draft, but they didn't have a lot of picks. So Cleveland, who has had a lot of picks the last couple of years. They had 11 picks last year and 10 picks the year before that. Well, how many picks did they have? 8?
Yeah, they had 8 picks this year. Well, again, most of them they traded now for stars because they're getting stars now. When they were trading with all those picks, they were trying to just accumulate picks to rebuild.
Well, the Wills move I like, but all in all, I didn't like their draft. Cincinnati, great draft. They really did. Joe Burrows, who, if they protect him, and they still have Williams, who's coming, Jonah Williams, who didn't play at all last year because he tore his ACL. He will play this year. Did he tore his ACL or his Achilles?
Tore his ACL.
His ACL. So he's coming back this year. He's a guy that's going to be implemented into the offensive line. This is an offensive line that needs to be reconstructed. And you see with Jonah Williams, he's something that you need to look forward to as far as I'm concerned. I was very surprised that they didn't add any offensive line help in the draft, especially with a quarterback of Joe Burrow's stature. This is a guy that doesn't move good in and out of the pocket. He is a pocket-present quarterback. Some people compare him to Jared Goff. So I'm very surprised they didn't add any offensive line help, especially as much. They added a guard in the 6th round, a guy that I've never even heard of. So
well, he's from Kansas football. It's not really a product of great football players. So
I'm very surprised they didn't add any offensive line help, especially how clustered the offensive linemen that were in this draft. But T. Higgins was a guy that was very underrated. A lot of people thought could have been a first-round draft pick. A lot of these wide receivers could have been a first-round draft pick. He was drafted early in the first round, early in the second round. So I was very surprised about that. Logan Wilson, another good linebacker, Wyoming player. He was picked fairly low in this year's draft. I thought he was going to be a late second round, early third round. He fell to 65 for them, so I was very surprised about that as well. So all in all, I gave the Bengals an A. So they had a very good draft as well.
All right, we're going to the South now?
Yes.
All right, so AFC South for me. Some good drafts, some okay ones, but mostly good here in the AFC South. We'll start with the Texans. Texans, obviously, they traded all their picks away, so they don't have many to work with. I gave them a C. I like their first pick, their second-round pick in Ross Blacklock. He's a good defensive tackle that'll definitely help that run defense. They lost DJ Reader. J.J. Watts obviously had trouble staying healthy, so that will help their run defense, which was very good last year. And now they get a nice pick to help them. Jonathan Greenard's a decent pass rusher in the third round, speed rusher that'll end up helping them. And then John Reed, the Penn State corner, I like in the fourth round. I thought they got good value. But again, all in all, they didn't really have much to work with. Nothing that could really fill their big needs, because beyond that, they've had a pretty bad offseason for the most part. The Titans, I gave them a B. I think they had some good draft picks, some reaches. They had a good mixture of everything, but I think when you talk about filling needs, I think they did a nice job with that. I love the pick of Christian Fulton in the second round. I thought he was a great value pick. Maybe that's him and Mims are probably right there with the best value picks of the second round. Isaiah Wilson is a kind of a backup tackle, developmental tackle. I didn't mind that in the first round. You lost Jack Conklin. Dennis Kelly's a decent tackle, but he's also getting older, and again, he's up and down. Darrington Evans is a pick that was very interesting to me. I thought it was a little early, but it wasn't bad. I like him as a player, good agile running back that could serve as more of a pass-catching option. And again, the Titans can't just wear out Derrick Henry all the time either, because he's a power back. And again, that could wear and tear throughout the season. And then you saw in the AFC Championship game, you could see he was overworked. So the Titans, I think, did a nice job for the most part. And then two teams I think that did very well were the Colts and the Jaguars. The Colts, I gave an A-. Again, another team that did not have a first-round pick. They traded it for DeForest Buckner. But I think they made the most of...
Speedy, just don't go through all the picks, because we have to get through the NFC as well. So
of course. So I think the Colts, considering that, they got Michael Pittman, they got Jonathan Taylor in the second round. Both are nice players for value. And I think Taylor will eventually start over Marlon Mack later in the season, too, because Marlon Mack is a phasey player. Two late picks I like were Jacob Eason and Desmond Patman as well. Eason, developmental quarterback, but again, Rivers is only there for 1 year, so maybe they can make that work. And Desmond Patman, a nice little slot guy who can end up making a difference as well. And one of my other A's was the Jacksonville Jaguars. I thought they did a very nice job in this draft. Two nice first-round picks with C.J. Henderson and Kayla Chason. That'll help out that defense. Laviska Shenault in the second round. Nice receiver. Again, he might take a little time to get going because of his injury as well. But again, good depth throughout, too. A lot of picks as well. Getting some depth on that defense. Shaq Quarterman I like in the fourth round, and Davon Hamilton in the third as well. So I think Jacksonville, another one that gets an A for me.
All right, so I'm just going to grade because we got to get through this, and we don't have time. As you know, it's 6:42, and we have a special guest, the Cleveland Cavaliers play-by-play announcer. So let's go through it. Houston Texans, I graded them a B. The Tennessee Titans, I graded them an A-. Indianapolis Colts, I graded them an A-. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, I graded them an A-.
You got an A-? Too?
Yes.
All right.
So I've got 3 teams with A-s and 1 team with a B.
Well, the Texans really didn't have much to work with, so it's hard for them. All right, for the West, I had 2 A's in the West, too. I had the Chargers and the Broncos. I think both had phenomenal drafts. Chargers with Herbert, Broncos with Judy, but also a lot of good value picks throughout that. The Chiefs, I gave a B+. I think they had some good value. I love the pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round. And then there's the Raiders, who you've heard me making fun of them all of the draft show on Thursday. They got my worst grade. They got a D. Besides Tanner Muse and Brian Edwards, there were no value picks for the Raiders. I'm sorry.
Kansas City, I gave them an A. I think Kansas City had one of the best, really the best drafts. They added offensive help. They added a running back, which they desperately needed at the end of the first round. Probably the best running back in this year's draft. I like what Kansas City did. I give them an A. Denver Broncos, I give them an A as well. The wide receiving core that they added to me, Judy, who I think is one of the most underrated wide receivers we've seen in the last couple of years. This guy's an explosive player. What's his name again? Halmer? Or?
KJ Hamler.
Hamler is another speedy guy, small guy that's going to give him speed on the outside and the inside. You can move him in the slot. Another value pick that they got in the second round. So he's another guy. So all in all, I gave Denver an A-. I thought they had a very good draft. Oakland Raiders, again, I wouldn't give them a D. I gave them a C-. I don't understand why they drafted Ruggs. They had a chance with Judy. They had a chance with CeeDee Lamb. Instead, they added Ruggs. Now, Ruggs is the fastest guy in this year's draft. Understandable. All in all, he is not Judy, and he's not Lamb. And just because of that, I graded them a C-.
Arnett was pretty bad, too.
The Los Angeles Chargers, I think they had a fairly good draft. They added a quarterback. Justin Herbert, I think, is the best quarterback in this year's draft. They added some defensive line help. They added some offensive players in this year's draft. I like what they did. So all in all, I gave the Los Angeles Chargers a B+.
All right, NFC East for me. The Eagles were the one that was weird, which was surprising. I gave them a C. I didn't really like a lot of the Eagles draft. Jalen Reagor was a nice pick in the first round, but beyond that, they really did not draft for need or value very well. Jalen Hurts was a very strange pick for the second round. Okay, better backup quarterback than Nate Sudfeld, but not much value in terms of the Eagles as a whole in terms of their drafts. But the other 3 teams I liked. I think the Redskins did a nice job. I gave them a B. Obviously, they got Chase Young. I would, again, like I said, I would have tried to explore trading back, but maybe the offer wasn't there. Antonio Gibson's another guy that's very interesting in the third round, one of those dual receiver running back types. I think they could definitely utilize him with the right coaching as well. So they get a B. The Giants got a B+. Good value picks for the most part. Not the picks I would have made, but again, good value picks. The only thing I didn't like with the Giants draft is they didn't address enough with their front 7.
And they didn't get a pass rusher.
That's what I was hoping. I was hoping for them to get Epinesa in the second round and linebacker help, but they didn't really do that. But again, good value for the most part. Obviously with Thomas and with McKinney, who's your favorite safety in the draft. He's my third, and I think he'll definitely be a good player to watch out for. And the Dallas Cowboys, they get an A as well. Another one of my A's. Beeve, as much as you want to say CeeDee Lamb's going to be a bust, he's not. He's going to be one of the best receivers, maybe the best receiver in this class. He's going to emerge nicely on that team. You got Trayvon Diggs, who's not a bad corner. They needed a corner. I didn't love their defensive picks after that, but their offensive line got a lot better with Bayadas as well, the center from Wisconsin. So I gave them an A.
I gave the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Philadelphia Eagles did really nothing in this year's draft. They had a really good offseason. I would have expected a better draft. They didn't land the players that you expected them to land. They added some quality players. I'm not going to say, and we don't know what Jalen Hurts is going to be. Is he going to be a wide receiver? Is he going to be a quarterback? Obviously, they're going to move him into quarterback. And why would they draft Jalen Hurts when they have a young quarterback like Carson Wentz? That made no sense. And Jalen Hurts expects to start. So I don't know what they're going to do.
That's not happening unless Wentz gets hurt.
I don't know what they're going to do with Jalen Hurts. So that made no sense. Wallace is a good pickup in the fourth round. A safety, Clemson. I was very surprised he fell to the fourth round. I gave them a C+. The New York Giants. I like the offensive lineman they added in Thomas. I like McKinney. I like what they did in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And after that, some of the players that they added, it didn't make any sense. They didn't add a pass rusher. I was very surprised about that. They added some guard help. They added some players. They added some corners and stuff like that. I don't think they need any more corners. They drafted 3 corners last year. They added another corner. Obviously, they don't trust the corners that they drafted. They added the UCLA corner.
Darnay Holmes.
I thought
that was a reach.
A lot of the picks later in the rounds, in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and even all the 7th round picks were all reaches. All of them. T.J. Brunson, don't even know who he is. I mean, so Chris Williamson, I know who he is. But it's another reach. I think he would have probably been an undrafted player if the Giants didn't draft him. So I was very surprised in the later rounds where the Giants went. So all in all, I gave the Giants a B-. The Washington Redskins, I think they had a fairly good draft. I really do. They traded Trent Williams. You knew you weren't going to keep him. You got a 3rd and a 5th. So that was a good value. San Francisco 49ers, 2 value picks. But all in all, I think they added some quality corners in this year's draft. They added some wide receiving help for their young quarterback. So all in all, I like what they did. So I gave the Washington Redskins a B+. And the Dallas Cowboys, they were on my highest, as far as the board is concerned. I thought the Dallas Cowboys were in the top 3 in drafts this year. They were unbelievable. They got CeeDee Lamb. This was their best. Remember, they didn't have that many picks. They had 7 picks, but all of them were valued. CeeDee Lamb, good player. Trayvon Diggs, good player. Neville Gulmer, another good pick. Reggie Robinson, that was a reach. Tyler Bladas, who could have been the best center in this year's draft. He fell to them. I mean, all in all, this was one of the Cowboys' best drafts.
So they were number 1 on your entire board?
Number 1 on my entire board.
Right,
I gave them an A+.
They were close to that on mine. We haven't gotten to my number 1 yet. It is not in the NFC North, though. Let's go there now. Start with the Green Bay Packers.
You got to hurry up because we have 11 minutes.
Packers, a weird draft for them. They didn't get a linebacker. They didn't get a defensive lineman. They didn't get a receiver. So there's a lot of things not to like with the Packers. They reached a lot. I like Jordan Love, and I trust them to be able to develop him. But again, I didn't think they needed to address that this year. The Bears, another team, also I gave them a C-, just like the Packers. I like Jalen Johnson, but beyond that, I don't think they did well at all. Cole Kmet in the 2nd round was a bad reach for me. They don't need tight ends. They need an offensive line and or receiver. And beyond that, there's really no names that I really like on this list. The 2 teams that did well, both to get A- are the Lions and the Vikings. I'll start with the Lions. They get Okudah. They get DeAndre Swift in the 2nd round, which they need a running back, so that's definitely helpful. Julian Okwara.
You like the Lions draft?
I do. I think they did a nice job. I know it's strange. Usually I bash them all the time, but I actually did like it this year.
I didn't like the draft.
Okay. I think Swift will end up helping them, and then Okwara in the 3rd round. They need a speed rusher. The only problem I have with the Lions draft is too much interior and offensive line depth later on, whether I would have looked to develop more on defense. The Vikings, I gave them an A- too. Now, I wouldn't have drafted Jefferson as my primary target there. I would have probably went for either Ayuk or Chenault as that receiver. But again, they filled the need for receiver. They drafted a couple good corners with Dantzler and Gladney. So they filled their needs a little bit. The only thing they didn't get, like the Giants I was saying, was a pass rusher. So A- for the Vikings.
Green Bay, I like Jordan Love. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in this league. I was very surprised they moved up to get him, but obviously they don't think that Aaron Rodgers has that much left. So that was a good pick for them. But all in all, their draft was really, really bad. They didn't add any wide receiving help for Aaron Rodgers. Very surprised. No weapons. They added a tight end in the third round who wasn't even the best tight end in the draft. It just made absolutely no sense the way they were drafting after the first round. So, all in all, they were one of my lowest grades. I gave them a D+. Minnesota had a very good draft. All in all, I think their team needed some weapons. They added some weapons, especially later in the rounds. They added some wide receiving help. They added some defensive line help. And even offensive line help. So, all in all, I gave... What did I give them? I don't even know what I gave them. I'm going to give Minnesota a B+. Okay. The Chicago Bears had a terrible draft. A terrible draft. I don't know what the hell they're doing. I gave them an F.
Oh, they were
I gave them an F. They were terrible. I don't know where the hell they were going in the draft. They were hitting... Go up to the draft. Just move up to the line. What's going so slow?
I'm trying to scroll down.
Well, scroll down. Use the arrow keys over there. Don't use the mouse. Cole Kmet. None of these guys, Jalen Johnson, none of these guys were at the top of the board in any of my boards. So it made absolutely no sense. So to me, I gave them an F or a D-, whatever you want to give them. If you don't want to give them an F. Detroit Lions, another team that I didn't think did very well. They should have never traded Darius Slay. It made absolutely no sense. And if they didn't trade Darius Slay, they might have went after maybe a Young or maybe Simmons or somebody like that. It just made no sense. To me, all in all, I gave the Lions a C+.
So you don't like Swift as a prospect? Is that what it was? Or?
No, it's not that I don't like Swift, and he's a good. He's probably the best running back in this year's draft. But again, you're getting two players. All the rest of your draft is really not that good. So I gave him a C+, and I'm not going through each player like you were, Speedy. So I gave him a C+.
All right, so South for me. Not a lot of good drafts in the South.
We got to hurry up.
Yeah, we do. Both the Panthers get a C for me. I thought they reached a lot. Derek Brown, I like the player, but again, I didn't think it was a big need for them, and they reached a lot. I like Gross Matos in the second, but that was really it. Falcons C+ for me. I like the pick of Marlon Davidson in the second, but again, I think they reached a lot beyond that. But they did fill their defense. They needed to fill their defense, and they did that. The New Orleans Saints, a B- for me. I didn't like their first pick with Cesar Ruiz, but they got Zach Bond later on, and they got some decent depth beyond that. Tampa Bay gets a B for me. I like their first two picks, and I like Keyshawn Vaughn. I think they drafted him a little early for my liking, though, so they get a B.
The Saints, I gave them a C-. To me, they had a value pick in Bond. I thought him falling to them in the third round was sensational. They added to me a good edge linebacker. You can use him as a pass rusher. They have a bag of riches as far as linebackers are concerned and pass rushers on that team. So they really didn't need him, but he fell to them. All in all, I gave him a C-. I really didn't like the draft. The Atlanta Falcons, I gave them a B-. I thought they had a better draft than the Saints. I think they added some value picks. They added some corners. They added some defensive linemen. So all in all, I gave them a B-. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I gave them a C+. I do like their first two picks, but all in all, I think the later rounds were not that good. I don't like some of the value picks that they had later in the draft. So I didn't really like them. The Carolina Panthers, I thought, had the best out of all.
Really?
Yes. I think the Carolina Panthers had the best in their division. I graded them a B+. I like some of the value picks in the later rounds. I really do. And if you go up and down their draft board, their first two picks were fairly good. I mean, you didn't like the first two picks?
I like the player
Derek Brown could get to the quarterback.
I like the player Derek Brown. I don't like the need Derek Brown. I think the Panthers and other areas they could have gone.
I also like Troy Pride from the cornerback from Notre Dame, which they got in the fourth round. So all in all, I gave him a B+.
All right, NFC West for me. So we'll start with the Seahawks. They get a C. They draft weird all the time. So I'll just say that Pete Carroll get them to work somehow, but not much beyond that. The 49ers, they get a C for me as well. The Javon Kinlaw pick confused me in a lot of ways. They just needed to overload that area. That made no sense. I would have either gone receiver or corner, preferably receiver with Judy and Lamb both still on the board at that time. I do like Brandon Ayuk, though, but that's really it. And then they didn't have much picks to work with beyond that. So they get a C. I like the Rams. I gave them a B-. They didn't have many picks to work with, but I think they got some good value. I like Terrell Lewis. I was telling you and Katie about Terrell Lewis for the Jets. He ended up going to the Rams. I like Terrell Burgess, the safety they got. And Cam Akers is a decent running back, too. Not much beyond that, though. Again, not much to work without a first-round pick. And then my A-plus was the Arizona Cardinals. I think they had the best draft of all. I think they had a ton of great value. Isaiah Simmons in the first round. They get a first-round caliber offensive lineman, late first-round caliber offensive lineman in Josh Jones. 2 good interior defensive tackles. And Evan Weaver, 6th round. Eno Benjamin, 7th round. Those are guys I had as more 3rd, 4th round picks, and they got him that late. That's really impressive. They are my lone A-plus in the Arizona Cardinals.
Really?
Yes.
All right, I thought Arizona did very, very well, like you were saying. So I gave Arizona, Isaiah Simmons fell to them. I was very surprised he was going to fall to them. Thought he was a top 5 pick. I think he was the best player in this year's draft. Josh Jones, another good player. I was very surprised he fell into the 3rd round. A lot of people thought he was an early 2nd round draft pick. And like you were saying, Evan Weaver and Benjamin, all guys that a lot of people thought were going to be early draft picks in the 3rd or 4th round, and they fell all the way to them in the 6th and 7th round, so I was very surprised. I gave them an A-. The Los Angeles Rams had a fairly good draft. They did. They added some good pieces in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round. Another team that I think are lacking certain positions, the wide receiving position, and they added Van Jefferson, and I thought Van Jefferson was a 3rd round draft pick. I didn't think he was an early 2nd round draft pick the way they drafted him. I think they should have drafted Mim. I was very surprised they didn't draft Mims, and I thought the Jets were going to draft Van Jefferson because Van Jefferson's father is the wide receiving coach for the New York Jets. Right. Mm-hmm. So I thought Van Jefferson was going to go to the Jets. That didn't happen. All in all, I gave the Rams a B-. Seattle, they did not have a good draft. I don't know.
They always draft weird.
I don't know what Seattle was doing in this year's draft. But again, these value picks that they had could turn out to be great players. So all in all, I gave Seattle a C+. And San Francisco, making that trade for Williams, I think really, really helped their draft. I think their draft early did not look good. Later in the round looked better. I think they had a lot of good value picks in the later rounds. So I gave them a B- because the fact that they added Williams, who I think Trent Williams is going to help them. Staley retired, and then they had a Pro Bowl caliber player like that in Williams, who I think could play another 4 or 5 years, especially missing 2 years of football. All in all, I think San Francisco. I give San Francisco a B- as well. So a lot of B- and a C-. So there you go. Those are my drafts.
Very
interesting. Those are your drafts, too.
Very interesting. We didn't have many disagreements, but you really didn't like the Lions, huh?
I did not like the Lions. Huh. I didn't like the
Lions.
I usually
draft.
don't.
That's weird, but I did.
I did not like the Lions draft. Mm-hmm. And again, when we come back, our special guest, the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Speedy?
Tim Alcorn.
There you go. Tim Alcorn here on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to Down to the Wire on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
(631) Yes. 631-965-4990. As you know, this is Down to the Wire. We are live every single Monday and Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As you guys know, you can reach us by going to our website at www.worldwidesportsradio.com. Well, we have our special guest. He's on the phone right now, and he is the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tim Alcorn. What's up, Tim?
Hey, it's good to talk to you guys. Hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Absolutely. Hopefully this is almost over, Tim.
Well, I think we got a long ways to go, but we'll let the scientists and medical professionals and those who know a lot more than we do lead the way. But yeah, hopefully we've got a bright road ahead.
Oh, we can only hope. Well, Tim, I want to know, my first question for you is, what do you think about The Last Dance? I mean, this has been a great documentary. Yesterday it was the 3rd and 4th episode. I thought it was very impressive, very well drawn, and really, you get to learn a lot about Phil Jackson, Jerry Krause. What did you think about this documentary so far?
Well, I think it's been terrific. And when you have the amount of information and the amount of footage they have, it allows you to go through an entire 10-hour series. I mean, that's really in depth. And I'm an older guy, so I lived through a lot of this. I know last night was the shot, as we call it here in Cleveland, when Michael Jordan knocked out the Cavaliers, and so that still gets talked about to this day. And when Jordan hit that shot over Craig Elo, I was actually sitting behind that basket in the media section. And one of these days, I'm going to slow that thing down, that famous highlight, and look for myself. But no, it has been so well done, and obviously, to get a behind-the-scenes look, as folks have been able to see here for 2 Sundays now, last Sunday and last night, I think it has been tremendous.
Tim, moving on to the current Cavaliers, it was a big thing with at the beginning of the season with John Beilein and him and the Cavs with the young players. They had a scuffle. Are you surprised Beilein resigned quickly like he did? And also, are you surprised a former college coach and a good college coach at Michigan had trouble with young players?
Well, to answer your first question first, was I surprised that he resigned when he did? Yeah, I think everybody was. He had been on the job less than a year, and certainly I think Coach Beilein knew the situation that he was inheriting once he came on board. But that being said, to say you understand it is a lot different than having to go through it. And John Beilein is a Class A person. He's a Class A coach. But I think his background and his resume is such that he is so used to winning, he found it difficult, number one, transition to the NBA just as far as the number of games and the lack of practices. And number two, going through a rebuilding, retooling type of process like the Cavaliers are going through. So, yeah, I was surprised. And then number two, as far as college to NBA, I think a lot of coaches have had that problem. They say, they meaning the coaches, oh, I can handle this coaching basketball as coaching basketball, but most of them have found out it's a lot different. Not just, the veteran guys who are older, they're not college age, and as I alluded to earlier, the limited number of practices you have once the season gets going. That schedule is unrelenting. The games just keep coming, and you don't have a lot of practice time in between. And I think for a young basketball team, that presents challenges. And for a coach coming from the college background that John Beilein came from, that was a very, very challenging adjustment.
We are talking to the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tim Alcorn. Tim, the roster, and Andre Drummond is one of the best rebounders in the league, one of the best big men in the league. What were your thoughts when the Cleveland Cavaliers made that trade and brought in Andre Drummond?
Well, first of all, it was a no-brainer as far as acquiring Andre Drummond for what the Cavaliers had to give up. And again, that's not a knock on John Henson or Brandon Knight, two terrific guys, and they were really good teammates and true professionals, but they certainly were not in the Cavaliers' plans, and they were on expiring contracts and so forth. So to give those two guys up along with a second-round draft choice for a perennial all-star center, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I think one of the disappointing things as far as the league coming to a halt as it did was J.B. Bickerstaff, now the head coach of the Cavaliers. He really didn't have an opportunity to see what he could do with Andre Drummond as far as different lineup combinations and that sort of thing. So, but it was a great deal at the time that it happened. When the NBA starts back up again, and we certainly hope that happens, then hopefully J.B. Bickerstaff is going to have an opportunity to see what Andre Drummond can add to this lineup, because his resume and certainly his stat sheet, it speaks for itself.
There were stories coming out from Cleveland over, in the last couple of months that Kevin Love wants out of Cleveland. There were stories coming out in L.A. that L.A. was going to try to make a trade at the trade deadline for Kevin Love because he fit very, very well with LeBron James in Cleveland when they won the title. What are your thoughts on Kevin Love? Do you think he wants to be there, or do you think he wants to be traded?
Well, believe me, those conversations are well above my pay grade. I think conversations are always happening with GMs in the NBA. That's part of their job. They have to do that. If not, they're not doing their due diligence. So how many of those conversations took place or how in-depth those conversations went, I don't know. I can only say that Kevin Love has been the consummate professional this year with the Cavaliers. His effort has spoken for itself. He's averaging pretty close to a double-double every night. So his effort has been there. His professionalism has been there. And again, when the trade discussions took place, I'm sure that dialogue was healthy, but you're not doing your job as a GM, number one, if you don't pick up the phone when people call, and perhaps on the other side, you're not doing your job if you don't dial somebody else to inquire as to the availability of a player. I think that happens all the time.
We are talking to the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tim Alcorn.
Tim, dealing with Kyrie Irving now, obviously he was with the Cavaliers for a long time when LeBron was there and even before LeBron was there. And kind of at the end of his Cavs career into now, we've seen a lot of antics that have always been talked about. Are you surprised this drama has gotten to the level that it has over the last maybe 5 years or so?
Well, number one, I wasn't working for the Cavaliers when Kyrie was playing here. I was working for a radio station that was a Cavaliers affiliate. So I certainly had covered Kyrie Irving, but not on that day-to-day basis as the play-by-play guy. This is my first year as the play-by-play guy. But Kyrie is one very unique individual. He says some things and he does some things that'll really make you scratch your head sometimes. His basketball playing ability is beyond question. I mean, he is just a terrific player, but sometimes it's a little more than that, as they found out in Boston and in your neck of the woods in Brooklyn, as far as what he would say or what he would do that would raise eyebrows. So he's a unique character in that locker room, and I think he pretty much made it known when he left Cleveland that he kind of wanted to be the guy, to be the alpha male on a team. And when he got to Boston, he found out it's not as easy, and it certainly may not be the position that everybody is designed to be put in. So he's a very intriguing guy. His basketball ability is just outstanding.
Tim, what are your thoughts of LeBron James? I mean, he brought a championship home to Cleveland. I know you were there. You weren't the play-by-play guy. But the greatness of what he gave to the Cleveland Cavaliers coming back from Miami, he left Cleveland. They were burning his jersey. Then he went to Miami, won 2 titles in Miami. And then he went back to Cleveland because he wanted to bring a title to Cleveland because Cleveland hasn't seen a championship in over 50 years. What did he bring to the Cleveland Cavaliers when he brought that championship home?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I mean, and it would take quite a while to answer. I mean, there's been books written about it. But the long and short of it is, I'll simply say that LeBron James delivered. He came back to Cleveland from Miami. And in the initial letter that he wrote in Sports Illustrated, he said, my desire is to bring a championship to Cleveland. And he delivered, and especially the way that they came through in 2016, being the only NBA team to come back from a 3-1 deficit, winning games 5 and 7 on the road in Golden State. I think years from now, decades from now, as much as we marvel at that now, we're just going to be astonished by it once it really gets into history, because he basically carried that team on his back. He delivered a promise that really was pressure-packed. And, again, the first time he left, it certainly didn't go over well, but not that fans were happy to see him leave the second time, but he delivered that championship to Cleveland as he promised, and his basketball playing ability, he'll go down as one of the greatest ever. And certainly he may be in L.A. now, but he's an Akron/Cleveland guy, and I think he'll always have a connection with this fan base and with this city.
Tim, judging the that series, when did you feel like there was ever any confidence that they could come back? Because obviously no team did come back from down 3-1. Were you thinking they were going to come back at any point, or were you still thinking, oh no, it's the Warriors, they're a 73-win team, they'll get it done at some point? When did you think that the Cavs could come back?
That's a great question. I mentioned earlier that I was working for an affiliate station on the Cavs radio network during that time, and I was doing a live pregame show on the floor of Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse during every NBA playoff game, including the finals. And when we were on the floor for Game 5, I'll be the first to tell you, I thought the NBA season was going to come to an end that night. I thought Golden State was going to win it in Cleveland. And when the Cavs won Game 5, I still think there was a lot of doubters. Like, well, you're going to go out there and win, or you're going to come back home and win Game 6. I should say, when we were on the floor for Game 6, I truly felt they were going to win it. Even when and then I thought, boy, now it's one game. And I have a theory. I don't know if it's right or not. I think everybody has a theory, but I have a theory. If it's a one-game series and you've got the best player on the floor, you've got a really good shot. And, I don't think there's any doubt in 2016, keep in mind, Golden State didn't have Durant at that time, that LeBron was the best player on the floor and in the league. And you go out to Golden State, and I think it's been well documented. He told those guys when they left Golden State in Game 5, you find a way to get us over the hump in Game 6, and I'll carry us in Game 7. And boy, he did. It was just amazing. So, I'll say once they won Game 6, I actually had a pretty good feeling they were going to win Game 7 out in Golden State because, man, the pressure really went on the Warriors at that point.
We are talking to the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Tim Alcorn. Tim, I've watched Colin Sexton play for years in college. I mean, this is college and high school ball. This is a kid that I followed for years, and they drafted him a couple of years ago, and he's turned into a sensational point guard. A lot of people didn't think that this kid was going to really develop into the player that he is today. What are your thoughts to him as a player in the NBA?
Well, I think Colin Sexton has come a long way. You've got to remember, like most college players now, he didn't have a lot of experience coming into the NBA, kind of learning on the fly. In fact, he just turned 21 in the month of February. So, he's still got a long road ahead of him. But he really closed out the 18-19 season on a flourish. He was playing very, very well after the All-Star break. Late February, March, and then, of course, the year ended in April, and he had a terrific back half of the campaign. Now the Cavaliers draft Darius Garland in the first round of the draft last June, so Garland and Sexton have to get used to playing with one another as far as, a very young backcourt this year, Garland the rookie, and Sexton in only his second year. But boy, Colin Sexton, once he got comfortable playing with Darius Garland and obviously Kevin Porter Jr., another rookie on the Cavalier roster, Sexton just became this consistent scoring machine from about early February on. He was just racking up game after game of 20-plus points. He had career highs in 3 consecutive ball games. He's a very consistent scorer, and his game is improving. So I think the upside, I think the ceiling for Colin Sexton is just tremendous.
Tim, I know a lot of people know the story between LeBron James and Dan Gilbert. And Dan Gilbert is a very emotional owner. He likes to talk to his players and talk to the fans as well. He sends out letters. He talks to newspapers, and he loves to go in Cleveland. He loves to go on radio shows. We all know about Dan Gilbert. But what are your thoughts to their relationship when he was in Cleveland, LeBron was in Cleveland, and now that he's away from Cleveland? Are they ever going to build a relationship ever again after him handing his first champion, LeBron giving him his first championship and giving Cleveland his first championship, and then practically pushing LeBron away?
That's a good question, and I don't think anybody ever really knows truly the relationship between management and a player, ownership and a player. I will say this, Dan was very upset, as was the entire Cleveland fan base, when LeBron left Cleveland the first time and went to Miami. He was much more gracious, and he was much more complimentary of LeBron when LeBron went to L.A. A couple of years ago. So, I think there were some mending of fences. As I alluded to earlier, LeBron put an inordinate amount of pressure on himself to say, my goal is to bring a championship to Cleveland, and he did it. And I think Dan Gilbert has recognized that, in his goodbye letter, for lack of a better term, to LeBron when LeBron went to the Lakers. He said, we'll welcome you back when we hang your number from the rafters. So, I think in the smoke of of war, as they say, sometimes things get lost. But now that the two sides have kind of been through those battles together, I think there's respect on both sides, and certainly, as I said, LeBron delivered on what he promised. So I think Dan Gilbert really respects that and appreciates that.
Tim, last question for me. This is actually referring to your broadcast career. I found an interesting story about when you were with your previous station before you became with the Cavs play-by-play. And it's interesting that I found out you actually interviewed one of the high school football coaches that I think won a state championship from a bathroom stall. Is there an interesting backstory to how that ended up happening?
Yeah, well, when you did high school sports for as long as I did it, there were, oh my Lord, there's a multitude of stories I could tell. And the gentleman that was doing that article, he said, what's one of the more interesting ones? And that's true. We were looking for a place to do a pregame, conversation for 5 or 6 minutes, and there were all sorts of football players roaming around, 50, 60 football players, and he's like, man, it's loud, it's not background noise, and it was actually the coach that said, well, I know there's somewhere we can go that if we lock the door, nobody's coming in. And next thing I know, we were straddling a toilet in the men's room, and that's where we did the pregame interview. And it was it's one of those things you look back on, and you guys know if you're in broadcasting, you just find a way to get the job done, no matter how you have to get it done. So, and you know what? I loved doing high school sports. I still keep in touch with the high school coaches and those who I interacted with at that radio station, and great memories, great times, and there's something very special about it. But that being said, I'm incredibly blessed to now be doing Cavaliers basketball. It's my first year on the job, and I have absolutely loved every minute of it.
Tim, how's your family doing from all the COVID-19? And really, you told me you have a lot of family that is from Long Island. How's your family doing?
Well, here in Ohio, my family's doing well. My wife and I have 4 older children. We have a daughter who's in Columbus, Ohio, which is pretty much in the middle of the state, and she's down there and she's doing well. We've got another daughter who was at law school at Michigan State up in East Lansing, but they pretty much closed everything down, and so she came home with us for the last few weeks of her semester just to be around some people. So she came back home, and then we have 2 sons that are here with us. So, all in all, knock on wood, we're doing very, very well. And as I mentioned to you before we came up live, I do have a lot of family in the Long Island area. My mom's side of the family is from New York, and actually I have a brother that lives right outside of Albany, not quite where you are, but in the New York area. So my best wishes and my prayers are with all of those in New York. Certainly, this has been staggering for the whole country, but boy, your state has just been incredibly hard hit. So thoughts and wishes with everybody in the Empire State.
The great Tim Alcorn, guys. If you guys don't know who he is, he's the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is his first year, by the way, which he actually told Speedy. Speedy didn't even know it was his first year. So, Tim, why don't you tell everybody how they can find you?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. How they what?
Tell everybody how they can find you on social media.
Oh, social media. Well, I'm on Twitter at Cavs Alcorn. Cavs Alcorn. I'm on Facebook. It's a public account, so I do a lot of posting about the Cavaliers on those two. So believe me, if anybody wants to hit me up, they're more than welcome to.
One more question before I let you go. Are we going to have an NBA season?
Well, I think that's the great question, not only for the NBA, but really the American society as a whole, as far as when we're coming back and what will it look like when we come back. I know NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has said he'll look at things on May 1st, which will be this Friday. There'll be an evaluation as far as what will be the direction going forward. But I couldn't even harbor a guess, because I don't think anybody really knows what the future holds, be it the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, or in any line of work. It's just this moment of uncertainty in our nation's history. But I think if we listen to the medical experts and listen to the scientists and do what they suggest and the warnings that they heed, I think we'll all make it through just fine. But this certainly has been devastating, and so as I mentioned earlier, not just for New York, but for everybody, thoughts and prayers. So NBA basketball certainly keeps not only the franchises, the players, and the employees of the franchises in mind, but the fans. So all that being said, we'll see. I think that's the best answer that really anybody has at this point.
Well, if we have a season, I would love to get you back on and talk some Cleveland Cavalier basketball.
Oh, man, I would love to do it. You guys have been fun, and I appreciate you reaching out to me. And, again, to everybody on Long Island or wherever they may be listening, stay safe and be well.
Thank you, Tim, for joining us.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Tim Alcorn, the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to get into the last dance. The Chicago Bulls. I have a lot to talk about. I learned a lot of things backstage of Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. When we come back, we're going to get into that here on Down to the Wire.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You're listening to Down to the Wire on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Oh, get it? What? Little Snoop Dogg, baby. Me, Speedy, are here for Down to the Wire. Don't wire. I'm not a rapper, ladies and gentlemen. 631-965-4990. This is Down to the Wire. We are live every single Monday and Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here. We're here in New York. We're live in New York, Long Island, New York. Ladies and gentlemen, as you guys know, you can call our show, 631-965-4990. And you can follow us by going to all our social medias from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Now I want to get into The Last Dance. I really wanted to get into this last because there was so much we learned about the Chicago Bulls that a lot of people probably did not know in the 98 Chicago Bulls team. And I knew a lot about Dennis Rodman. I actually hung out with Dennis Rodman twice in the Hamptons. I was DJing.
What color was his hair then?
Purple.
Nice.
It was purple. And he was dating, what's her name again?
Carmen
Electra.
Okay.
He was dating Carmen Electra. I met Carmen Electra. And he's one of the funniest and most entertaining people you can hang out with.
I believe it.
And he likes to drink and he likes to have a little bit of fun. But Dennis Rodman, you learned a lot about him. Not only, well, first of all, he wasn't a bad boy when he came into the NBA. This was a quiet guy that wanted to learn the game, wanted to learn through people like the Isaiah Thomases, the Bill Lambiers, the John Sallys of the world. He became a tough man, a bad boy, really, when the Detroit Pistons were called the Bad Boys. And he threw people around. He really changed the game. He changed the NBA game because it became a bruising NBA game when he stepped on the basketball court. Dennis Rodman was one of the most underrated big men we have ever seen play the game. Yep. Not because of his personality, but because of his game. When you come to the NBA, you want to be that offensive player. You don't think defense, you think offense. I want to score 30 points. I want to have 9 or 10 rebounds and get about 5 or 6 assists, and I want to be the best player in the league.
Right. Players don't get fired up like he did with defense.
But he transitioned the game. He changed the game. And everybody's going to say, well, what about Bill Russell? What about Wilt Chamberlain? Those guys changed the game in their time. Dennis Rodman changed the game in the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s. And what he changed was he changed a style of game that you cannot push him. You can't push him around, and you can't push his teammates around, or he's going to push you around. And when he was traded from Detroit to the San Antonio Spurs, and only played with San Antonio Spurs for a couple of years, and then was signed by the Bulls, and everybody was saying, how is Michael Jordan going to work with him? How is Scottie Pippen going to work with them? Because of all the backlash they've had over the years with the Detroit Pistons.
The hatred, the rivalry, just everything. You just didn't know what it was going to be, and especially with his personality.
You really learned a lot in this documentary on how Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen took him in, no matter what he does, partying and acting like an idiot on and off the court. They took him in as a brother and really changed the chemistry of what this team was in the early 90s when they were champions, 91, 92, and 93, before Jordan retired and came back. He gave them that personality they never had. Dennis Rodman gave them that. The Chicago Bulls in the 90s, I hated them because I grew up a New York Knicks fan. Mm-hmm. And in the years of Charles Oakley, and yes, Charles Oakley played with Michael Jordan in the early 90s, in the late 80s. He was a part of the Chicago Bulls. And he's Michael Jordan's best friend. Michael Jordan will tell you that. Charles Oakley is Michael Jordan's best friend. But those years with the New York Knicks, with the Kiki Vanderways, the Xavier McDaniels, the Anthony Masons, the John Starks, the Charles Smith, the Charles Oakleys, the Knicks could never get over the hump against this Chicago Bulls team. And if you're watching this documentary, I would say 90% of the clips with the music behind it, you saw them killing the New York Knicks. So, as a New York Knicks fan, I did not like the Chicago Bulls. But now when you look at how great Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman were, and some of these other players like the Tony Kukocs and the B.J. Armstrongs and the Bill Cartwrights, these guys were all important pieces of this dynasty. Arguably one of the greatest basketball teams of all time.
Definitely. And probably the most intimidating because of that mentality and guys like Rodman coming over there. Because Jordan was already intimidating himself.
When you look at Phil Jackson, we all know how great Phil Jackson is. But you didn't know how he got the job. I did. I knew it. But some of the young millennials that don't know anything about the Chicago Bulls, all they know is Phil Jackson, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan. That's all they know. They don't know what it entailed to giving Phil Jackson that job.
And I didn't even realize how much Phil Jackson made Michael Jordan change his game to a sense.
Absolutely.
I didn't even realize that because a lot of times with those coaches, especially if you're a great player, you'll just say, all right, you do your game, I'll coach everyone else. That wasn't the case.
And I didn't know that Collins didn't want to play the triangle. I did not know that Collins did not want to implement the triangle in his style of offense. That was one of the reasons why Collins was fired from the Chicago Bulls.
Now, was the triangle something that was used before that?
Yes.
Even before Phil
New York
Jackson?
Knicks in the 70s.
All right, so when Phil Jackson was a player.
Yes, when he was a player, the Celtics used, they implicated the triangle in their style of offense with the Bill Russells of the world, and the New York Knicks did it in the 70s with the Reeds, the Fraziers, the Monroes, the great New York Knicks teams. But Phil Jackson, when he got the job, he changed the Chicago Bulls culture. not to winning, because they were still getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they couldn't get over the hump. They couldn't beat the Detroit Pistons. They couldn't beat those good Eastern Conference teams like the Boston Celtics. When Phil Collins took over, when Phil Jackson took over for the Chicago Bulls, he changed everything. He became Dennis Rodman's best friend. And Dennis Rodman said he didn't look at me as a player. He looked at me as a friend. And Dennis Rodman said it on that documentary. Phil Jackson's one of his best friends.
That's hard to believe, though, too, considering what
Phil Jackson was the same type of player playing for the New York Knicks in the 70s as Dennis Rodman was playing for the Chicago Bulls.
That's hard to believe, though, because Rodman, you would think with that crazy personality, him and more calmer Zen master type coach like Phil Jackson, you wouldn't think those things would mesh, and it ended up surprising me when I saw that, how good of a connection they had.
They had a great connection, and I did know that because when Dennis retired and I had the opportunity to hang out with him, I was DJing, it was in the Hamptons, and he came out, he was the guest over there, and he brought Carmen Elentra, and I got to hang out with him in the VIP section. The one thing I asked Dennis Rodman is, what was your connection with the Chicago Bulls? And he said, I wouldn't have stayed with the Chicago Bulls for the 98 championship if Phil Jackson wasn't there. Mm-hmm. Phil Jackson really kept that team together. The Zen Master kept that team together. And as much as everybody can't stand Phil Jackson for what he did to the New York Knicks, he was the mastermind. And everybody says Jerry Krause. And Jerry Krause, I don't like how the Chicago Bulls players put this guy down. Even when he was dancing on the plane, when they got over the hump against Detroit, Scottie Pippen told him to sit down. You know what I mean? They didn't respect this man. And this guy built a dynasty. He did. Now, he didn't draft Michael Jordan, but he drafted Scottie Pippen. He made the move and brought in the guys like Tony Kukoc and John Paxton and all the players, B.J. Armstrong, the Horace Grants. And by the way, Horace Grant looks fat as hell, man. Yeah. I mean, his face is so fat. But you learned a lot in these last two episodes about Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen. By the way, Scottie Pippen, who doesn't get enough respect for who he is as a player and what he is as a player, this is to me, one of the top 10 defensive players of all time. Top 10. And you watched him when he defended Magic Johnson in the 1990. The first ones, 1991. I think it was the year, either the last year Pat Riley coached the Lakers or the second to last. I forget what it was, but nobody was giving him a shot against the Lakers, even after beating the Pistons. And as soon as they put Scottie Pippen on Magic Johnson, it changed everything. It changed the whole series. And Michael Jordan was the one that said that. When we put Scottie Pippen on Magic Johnson, that changed everything in that series. And Scottie Pippen didn't get enough respect by the Chicago Bulls, Jerry Krause, and that organization. And that's why he wasn't a long-lasting Chicago Bull. He went to Portland after that, and he got his contract. Scottie Pippen was one of the most underrated NBA superstars we have seen in the last 50 years.
And again, a great perimeter defender at that time in a game that wasn't really a three-point game was hard to find, too. Now they prioritize it because it's a perimeter game, but Pippen shut down Magic Johnson's shooting, too, and along with other good shooters that Lakers team had in the late 90s, obviously accumulating from their 80s team, the Showtime Lakers.
I was very surprised that Scottie Pippen actually asked for a trade that season when he came back in 98. He didn't care. He actually wanted to be traded. And he knew that the Chicago Bulls were never going to trade him.
Yeah, he was holding out for 2 months, 3 months in that season because Jordan was kept begging him back, and then Jordan kept shunning off the media because they were asking all these questions about Pippen for the longest time. He was gone for a good while until they just showed I think it was the second one yesterday, that there was just something that told me that he said he was going to lose if he had a holdout bidding war with the team, so he just started to play at that point.
And how about Michael Jordan going after Dennis Rodman, going to his hotel room? Yeah, Carmen Electra saying that she was hiding behind a couch with a blanket over her head because she didn't want to see Michael Jordan. She didn't want to see Michael Jordan, and she didn't want Michael Jordan to see her in the room because she knew that Michael Jordan was going to drag Dennis Rodman out by his hair if he wasn't going to go with him. And you saw Dennis Rodman leave with him and go to the stadium with his pajamas on.
Yeah, that was funny.
With his pajamas on. And this is a guy that was gone for almost 48 hours.
I found it interesting after that whole thing that they were saying how they were running laps and Dennis Rodman was running like full throttle even after, again, that night that he had, and the other players were just jogging and he was running full throttle. That was very interesting to me because usually you would think, all right, if this night out, you would think, he's not going to have the motivation. He was
drinking, he was partying.
Right. You wouldn't think you're in a motivation to run like he did. You would think you'd be probably laggy and stuff like that. And he was running like 4 laps ahead of everybody.
But that's the thing about Dennis Rodman I did know. He has an unbelievable motor. And that's what they said about Dennis Rodman. And Michael Jordan said, I knew that as long as Dennis was on the court, he was going to play hard. He was going to do everything he was supposed to do as a professional basketball player. It wasn't going to hold him back. And he knew that he could party for 36 hours. He could stand on the basketball court and compete with every single person on the court.
That is crazy, though. I'm just being able to run like that. You don't see that from everybody.
Well, Dennis Rodman was a freak of nature. So was Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan had all these security guards, and you saw also in the documentary, he had like 6 security guards following him. He's sitting down watching a basketball game on TV while these guys are surrounding him like somebody's going to attack him or bomb him up, or shoot him. It's unbelievable. Michael Jordan, what makes Michael Jordan so special is the fact, not because he was great, because we all know how great Michael Jordan was. It was his leadership that nobody knew about. And Michael Jordan said before this documentary came out that a lot of people are going to look at him differently after this documentary for the worse. I think I've looked at Michael Jordan for the best, because watching Michael Jordan go to Dennis Rodman's hotel room and practically drag him by his ear to the stadium with his pajamas on is remarkable, because everything I heard about Michael Jordan, in the past, is the guy used to degrade people on the court, his own teammates, and he told them, if you're not going to play hard, you might as well sit on the bench because you don't belong on the court.
I think that's what he said when the documentary came out too. All these young kids are going to think of me as this like devilish human being or something like that. And again, this has portrayed him completely the opposite. Yeah, he's intimidating. Yeah, he's tough. I think they were saying,
all the greats are like that.
I think they were saying even before
look at Tom Brady.
Right.
Look at Tom Brady screaming on the sidelines when his wide receiver can't get an overthrown pass to his hands. Right. I mean, he blamed the receiver because he couldn't catch the ball and run the right route.
I think they were saying even before the Carmen Electra hotel thing that Michael Jordan came up to his room, or he came up to Michael Jordan and he was like trying to apologize but never did, and then Michael Jordan gave it to him, just got mad and started shouting at him after a bad loss that they had, and he was missing a lot of rebounds, and that really fired him up too. And I think they went on the 13-game win streak at that point. After that, when they were really struggling to start the season. I think
they lost 4 games in a row in the beginning of the season.
Right, they lost they had that bad loss. I think it was against the Pacers, and then that was
because they didn't have Scottie Pippen. Yeah. And when and Dennis said that in the documentary, when Scottie Pippen came back, it wasn't no longer Michael Jordan and me. It was Scottie Pippen. I was the third wheel. And I understand what Dennis Rodman is saying, and it did bother Dennis Rodman because he loved the fact that he was the second guy behind Michael Jordan. And then when Scottie Pippen came back, Scottie really transitioned the game. He changed the game, not for the speed of the game, and really changed the motor of the game. Scottie Pippen, to me, could defend all 5 positions. And he could defend the point guard position, even the center position. We saw him defend big men. I saw Scottie Pippen in the 90s defend some of the biggest men in the NBA. Scottie Pippen, to me, was the most underrated player in those 90s. He was. Him and Clyde Drexler. Mm-hmm. And I loved Clyde the Glide Drexler because a lot of you kids don't know a lot about the guy, but he always gave Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas the most problems when they played him.
Now, they never met in the finals, though. They did? The Bulls and the Blazers?
The Blazers, the Bulls and the Blazers were in the finals.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought the Blazers final came a little earlier. Right?
No, the Bulls and the Blazers actually did play in the finals.
Because I know when he was with Houston those 2 years, that was when Jordan was playing baseball.
Yes. But over the years, when they played in the regular season, Clyde Drexler gave Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas the most trouble. Also, Larry Bird. Larry Bird had problems playing those Portland Trail Blazing teams with Clyde the Clyde Drexler. So a lot of people didn't know who Clyde Drexler is because he's not Michael Jordan, but he's one of the most underrated NBA superstars we've seen in our past.
So that was just one of those teams that probably just couldn't get past the Lakers. Was that their problem?
They couldn't when they did get past the Lakers, they couldn't get past the Chicago.
Right.
So that was the problem. They just didn't have enough.
Okay.
The Portland Trail Blazers just didn't have enough. But they were great games when we saw the Portland Trail Blazers play the Chicago Bulls. But getting back to this documentary, what really surprised me in these last two episodes was not the fact that Michael Jordan was a big pain in the ass, because he is. Michael Jordan is the most degrading person when it comes to basketball, because Michael Jordan expected excellence. That's what he expected. This is a champion. This is a guy that wanted to win. He had the eye of the tiger, just like Kobe Bryant. That's why a lot of people compare Kobe Bryant to Michael Jordan, because of their styles of games. Kobe Bryant tried to implement his style of game to Michael Jordan's. And even his wanting to win, his will to win championships was something that a lot of people didn't have. Larry Bird is one of the most quietest people you would ever meet. And as a basketball player, he didn't say much to the press. He loved to win, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't Michael Jordan. He didn't need to win. He wanted to win, but he didn't need to win. Michael Jordan needed to win. He wanted to win, and he believed in not losing. And when he lost in Eastern Conference Finals in 92, when he lost against, was it 92 or 90? No, I'm sorry, not 90, 89, 90.
Yeah.
When he lost against, not against the Celtics. When he lost against Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Oh, yeah, that was 89, 90, yep.
When he lost against Detroit, he swore to himself, and you saw what they did. After the season ended, a couple of weeks later, they were out training over there at the stadium.
Yeah, he said Michael Jordan said that Detroit team made him train harder than ever before, because before
and started lifting and put muscle on his body.
So he ended up playing 6 years before that, not really doing much in terms of the workouts. I mean, obviously he's getting stronger, but still, that Detroit team really motivated him and pushed him to be the player that he was. And all of a sudden later, 6 championships.
Who knows? Michael Jordan wouldn't have been Michael Jordan if it wasn't for the Detroit Pistons.
And they really did a nice job with those Jordan rules too, like just describing that, because that was something that was unheard of at that time too, and even looking now is unheard of when you look at it.
That's why it makes it so impressive when you talk about this Chicago Bulls and the '98 Chicago Bulls, The Last Dance. And when this documentary is over, I'll probably watch this documentary again, because I want to watch it completely through. You know what I mean? Spend a whole day and watch all 10 episodes. But what really stood out to me was Phil Jackson's leadership, the love that Michael Jordan had for Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen. Mm-hmm. He really did love those guys. He really did. Everybody thought that he would degrade people. And Tony Kukoc over the years said that Michael Jordan was one of the most degrading people that he's ever played with. Tony Kukoc said that. And John Paxson, you heard what John Paxson said last night. John Paxson, Phil Jackson had to tell Michael Jordan, get the ball to John. He's open. And then finally he started passing the ball. And Michael Jordan for years didn't feel like he had players around him to give the ball to. And then he had to trust the teammates that he had around him. And that was because of Phil Jackson and the triangle offense. Right. The triangle offense made Scottie Pippen the player he was today. From then, you know what I mean? Right. Scottie Pippen came out and said if Phil Jackson didn't coach the team and the triangle offense wasn't implemented in the style of game that they played, he might have not been the player that he was.
Gave him other good 3-point shooting options too throughout that bench, and made Pippen a little better with that. Obviously, that wasn't his specialty, but it made him a little better with that, rather than just Jordan shooting all the threes.
So when you think about the Chicago Bulls, and I can't wait to see next week on Sunday, because they're going through each and every player, if you notice that. They went from they talked a little bit with Horace Grant. Horace Grant was there. They spoke, and it's funny because Horace Grant was the big peewee of the team. If you really look at it, when Detroit was pushing him around, Michael Jordan used to pick him up and said, don't show him that you're hurt. If you show him that you're hurt, they win. They know they're winning if you show them that you're hurt. And when Scottie Pippen got slammed on the ground by Dennis Rodman, if you remember that, he didn't go and complain to the referees. He got up, he shot his foul shots, and they made sure that they did it on the score clock. That's what they did. They made sure that at the end of the game, they were up. They were going to win. They were going to sweep that Detroit Piston team.
That was their mission that whole year. That nothing was stopping them.
So, to me, to build a championship, yes, you need great players, but you need the heart. You need the heart to win. And when you look at those teams, those Chicago Bulls teams, and I'm not talking about Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Phil Jackson. I'm not even talking about those players. I'm talking about the B.J. Armstrongs, the Bill Cartwrights, the Luke Longleys, those type of players, those fill-in players that fit Phil Jackson's triangle offense. And Michael Jordan in the beginning did not like Phil Jackson. Mm-hmm. He absolutely couldn't stand Phil Jackson.
Now, when did Cartwright get there? Because he was with the Knicks for a while, too,
Yes.
they were showing.
He was traded for Charles Oakley.
Oh, straight up, okay.
Yes. So, and I remember that. Bill Cartwright was a top draft pick by the New York Knicks. It was a first-round draft pick by the New York Knicks. And Pat Riley wanted beef up front. He wanted a guy that was going to push people around, and Charles Oakley was one of the meanest players in the NBA. And he was on the Chicago Bulls. And I was very surprised Chicago traded Charles Oakley away. For one reason why is Charles Oakley was Michael Jordan's best friend, and he was the second best player on those Chicago Bulls teams in the late 80s. So it made no sense. Bill Cartwright, he was a good player. It wasn't a great player. Did he fit the triangle offense? You damn well he did. Damn right he did. And that's why Phil Jackson had a lot of big men on that team, because they fit the triangle offense. Guys that could play in the paint, that can move the ball from the paint to the outside and share the ball on the perimeter. That is a triangle offense. Mm-hmm. And he showed you what the triangle offense did.
And it's interesting because now we're seeing in today's NBA a lot of those concepts because of the three-pointer, big men that could pass. And really that was the only time it worked to that same effect where you had multiple guys, not just one big man, just multiple guys feeding the balls to different spots, whether it's mid-range or three-point. All their big men were very, very selfless in terms of knowing their role in the triangle offense and also changing it up depending on how long the shot clock was. But again, for the most part, the triangle offense was kind of faster paced where they were shooting pretty early, but they were saying, I'll move the ball too.
I was very impressed with the documentary. So far, what we've seen in the first 4 episodes has been very impressive. I was, we interviewed, what's his name again, last week. His friend is actually, he actually helped build the documentary.
The basketball announcer?
Yes.
Mike Inglis?
No, it wasn't Inglis.
Okay, because the rest of the guys are all baseball, so.
No. I'm trying to remember. The guy with the glasses from UConn, from Boston. Who was that? Kutcher.
Oh.
Yes, Kutcher. You don't remember what he said? That he said, I'm looking forward to watching
That's right,
the Last Dance documentary because my friend actually was a part of the documentary. He was one of the video guys. Mm-hmm. So he said that it was very well built and he's not even looking forward to the NFL draft. As a matter of fact, he said he wasn't even going to watch the NFL draft.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. He said he was just going to look at it on Twitter and watch The Last Dance. That's right. And he probably had exclusive access because of that before everyone else did.
I doubt it. He didn't say that he had access to it. He did say
he probably didn't reveal it, but maybe he did. We don't know.
No, you can't say that he did because he said he couldn't wait for it to come out and actually watch it on TV.
That's fair.
So,
all right.
But I was very impressed. I'm very impressed with everything that we've seen so far. I'm looking forward to seeing as the season progressed and as the playoffs, because the nastiness that happened in the 98 playoffs. I mean, there was a lot of nasty games and a lot of crazy games in the 98 playoffs all the way to the NBA championship. So I'm looking forward to that.
They foreshadowed the game one, and then now they'll probably build up on the rest of the series.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing what they have in store for episode 5 and 6 coming up next week. So The Last Dance, if you guys have not seen the first 4 episodes, definitely if you have a Fire Stick and you have to download it. You have to watch it. Or DVR it or find it on ESPN. Maybe they're replaying it. They're probably replaying.
They replayed episodes 1 and 2, I think 2 hours after it streamed live.
It was so far it's been very impressive. Really has. So I'm very excited to see next week. As a matter of fact, I hate watching documentaries and I don't watch TV episodes or TV shows because I don't want to wait until next week for the next episode. I don't. I got to wait for a whole week to watch the next episode on finding out what's going to happen.
Right.
So I don't really like that. So, but I'm looking forward to next week at 9:00 to watch The Last Dance with Michael Jordan and the 1998 Chicago Championship Bulls. So looking forward to that. But that's it for our show, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Tim Alcorn for joining us, the voice of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'd like to thank RTF Sports Radio for putting and nominating us as the top show of the month. Obviously, we did not win, as you guys heard in the beginning of the show. But thank you to Mike for actually picking us or choosing us to be in that nominee and being a nominee of a top radio show on his network. Tomorrow, we're going to have a lot of special guests. Who do we have tomorrow?
We got two tomorrow at 6:30. We have Hornets play-by-play announcer John Falk. And then at 7 p.m., we have Warriors radio play-by-play announcer Tim Roy.
So that's going to be something fun. And we got a lot of stories to talk about tomorrow. We really didn't get into it. We got into the NFL draft. I do want to get more in depth with the Giants and Jets tomorrow. We will get into that. I would like to get some of these draftees to get on our show. So we've reached out to all the different guys that draft prospects from the New York Jets and the New York Giants. Hopefully one of these guys or two of these guys would like to come on with us. We'd love to interview them. So hopefully we get them on. But until tomorrow, this is Errol Marks, Speedy Petey, and Down to the Wire saying good night, and we'll talk to you then. Good night, everybody.
You're listening to the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.